Okay, so you talked about this a little bit, right? The historic, right? The direction of power between whites and people of color is historic, traditional, normalized, deeply embedded in our society. Refers to the specific dimensions of racism that serve to elevate white people and people of color. And this counters the dominant, the traditional definition that people have been using, where we think about racism in terms of discrete behaviors, right? That some individuals may or may not be demonstrating, like, so he's a racist or she's a racist, right? But they're not, right? So that has been the conversation for so long, and whiteness takes it beyond that, right? Mm-hmm. Looking at structural, historic, deeply embedded racism in our society, right? It's a blanket over our whole society. It affects all of us, right? Oops. Oh, it is here. Yeah. So just some more definitions.
Sure. We're talking about, whiteness it's about structural things. It's a what kind of boundary, what are the boundaries of our lives and what directs our lives. It's not, me or you, although we participate in it. It's far bigger than individuals, which is what Tanya was just saying. And I like, that it's a standpoint too. I think that's an important kind of piece of this. In terms of, especially your point that you made earlier, in terms of there's people and then there's people of color. That's a really great illumination of that notion of standpoint. So, we come across, or we believe ourselves as normal and others as others. And I think that's really, really clear and key. And then I think the third one here, in terms of cultural practices, that's another thing that I think D'Angelo and a few other authors have talked about in terms of the undefined nature of what whiteness is. I know the author Toni Morrison kind of talks about this on occasion in various places. There's a wonderful video of her speaking to Charlie Rose, kind of illuminating us about the fact that all authors write about race. It's just that they're always writing from the perspective of their own, and so I think her bringing that into the conversation with Charlie Rose in that segment was a little bit, it took Charlie aback, and I think that's part of why Tony said. But that's, I think, where we start to get into, I guess, the discomfort of being interrogated, because speaking of standpoint, and speaking of the othering of there's people and people of color, once we start turning that lens back on the people and what that means and what the cultural practices are, that's where the discomfort starts to come. At least for white people, I feel, because they're not used to being under that lens. They're used to being directing of that lens, if that makes sense.